Hey guys, welcome to the video. Today I just wanted to talk about how to not make bad decisions. Specifically, I wanted to give you guys a method that's been helping me out a lot recently, and hopefully it'll carry over and help you guys too. So first off, let's talk about one of the biggest reasons why we make bad decisions. And that reason is just because of the fact that we feel some sort of pressure urging us to do something. And a lot of times when we feel some sort of urge, it's usually best to go against it, even though it doesn't feel that way. What ends up happening is you'll feel some sort of urge telling you to do something, and usually it'll offer some sort of short-term relief. It'll make you feel good in the short term, but in the long term it has a lot of consequences. And what ends up happening is that because you're feeling so much pressure, you only see that short-term relief and you don't see any of those long-term consequences, or you just don't think about it because your mind shields them out. Which makes perfect sense, because when you feel pressure, obviously you want to get out of it and you'll do anything. Usually you can do that with some sort of bad decision, which may seem good in the moment, but of course in the long term it'll hurt you. So let me give you an example, and then we can kind of dissect it and analyze what we could have done better. I'll basically give you my method through an analysis of the example. So this is something that happened to me a while ago, and I was basically working on a project where I was making something and everything was going well until one step of the project. I basically could have potentially ruined the project. Let's just say I had some sort of apparatus and I can't heat it past a certain temperature. One of the steps involved heating it up, but not to that high of a temperature. What I ended up doing was I set the oven to a really hot temperature and just left my apparatus in there, and 30 minutes later I realized, wait a minute, I can't heat it up past that certain temperature. And so I quickly ran and put my gloves on, took it out. But one thing I didn't know was if that device actually ended up reaching that temperature threshold that we can't go past, or if it was still cold. And so that kind of put a lot of pressure on me, because I didn't know if the device was still good or not. I guess it had a 50-50 chance of either being overheated and melted inside, or it was still good because it didn't end up reaching that high of a temperature just because it didn't have enough time. Now, as I said before, I'm feeling really pressured and I want to tell my higher ups what happened. At least that's what my mind is telling me, because I get relief from that burden of responsibility. Right now I'm responsible for it, but if I tell somebody else, like my higher ups, then they become responsible for it, and I basically shift my responsibility over to them. Luckily, that's not what I did. What ended up happening was I made the right decision, but before I get into that, let's think about what the possible options are. And this is where the method basically comes into play. The method I'm talking about is to just think about the long-term effects of your action. I know it sounds really simple, but trust me, if you master this technique, it will help you tremendously in your life, like it has mine. So basically what this method consists of is to just think about and analyze all of the decisions you have currently. So going back to my example, after I took out the device from the oven, the options I had were A, go out and tell my supervisor what had happened, or B, just not say anything. for the time being. Now, let's look at option A first. So if I went with option A, I would have told my supervisor what had happened, and my supervisor would have then probably not been happy with me and started looking at me in a worse way just because I made that mistake. So if I take option A, I end up in a worse off state in the long term. In the short term, I'm happy because my responsibility has been lifted, but in the long term, he's not going to be looking at me in a very nice way. Now, looking at option B, I could just not say anything for the time being. What that option allows me to do in that case, if we think it through all the way, is two things. If on one end the device isn't working and I ended up heating it up too hot, then what ends up happening is I'm going to have to be going up and telling my supervisor anyways that the device doesn't work and that I messed it up, and basically the end result is the same thing as option A. Or the device could still be working, so I took it out of the oven quickly enough and it didn't end up overheating. In that case, I continue with the build project and everything turns out well, and I didn't have to say anything to my bosses or my supervisors, and they think everything went fine. Meanwhile, what happens in the short term is I feel a tremendous amount of pressure, of course, because I don't know yet if the device is still working or not. But in the long term, I basically, if the device ends up working, then I have just saved myself from them thinking that I'm a complete idiot or that I messed up the device. So when we look at our two decisions that we can make, option A, I tell my supervisor what happened. What ends up happening is, in the long term, they look at me in a worse way. They think I'm stupid or that I can't be trusted with important things. Or if we take decision B, what ends up happening is two things. So we have two possibilities. A 50% chance, let's just say 50-50. A 50% chance that I ended up burning the object and overheating it and ruining it, where the end result is the same as option A. Or we have a 50% chance that everything turns out fine and I don't need to say anything and everybody thinks everything went normal and I end up being fine in the end and I don't lose any of my credibility. So I'm not saying that in this scenario that you're going to end up 100% unscathed, but I am saying that you can at least increase your chances of being unscathed by taking option B. With option A, you have a 100% chance of ruining your credibility, whereas with option B, you just have a 50% chance. Of course, the biggest thing is going through and thinking about your options and decisions like we just did. The biggest thing that's holding you back from doing that is the pressure. Whenever we feel pressure, we don't think about the long term, we think about the short term. What is the best option that offers me relief right now? Whereas that's usually not the best option, as we just saw with this example, in the long term. So what I'm trying to say is, whenever you are feeling very pressured, or you see that you are at a crossroads and you have a decision to make where you can either go this way or that way, analyze those decisions first. Try to think them through, think about the long-term effects, and see which one better suits you in the long term. And usually it'll be the one that is going to apply more pressure to you in the short term, but of course, in the grand scheme of things, it's best to have good long-term results. So that was just basically a long-winded way of me trying to tell you to just think about your decisions, try to analyze them as best as possible, think of them all the way through, especially when you are feeling very pressured. That's basically all I wanted to say today. I hope this helps you guys out, and I'll see you in the next video.